Jameel Janjua, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Ian. Nice to chat with you.
I know you've loved aviation for a long time. So take us back to when you were a kid in Calgary, going to the air show near Red Deer. What was that experience like?
So my father used to take my brother and I to air shows at the old Penhold, Canadian Forces Base Penhold, to the Red Deer International Air Show. And this would have been in the late 80s. And I remember seeing F-18s fly past at 200 feet and 500 knots and the snowbirds fly. And it was just captivating. It was something I had to do.
And then you join the Air Cadets, and then you become an officer in the Royal Canadian Air Force. And then you're at the controls of a CF-18. That's a pretty rare group of people in Canada who are fighter pilots. Tell us about that experience.
It was fascinating. It was a season of my life that I look back on with tremendous fondness. I mean, I was living out my dreams and I was surrounded by phenomenal people and officers and the men and women who service those aircraft in the Royal Canadian Air Force. And we had a mission to serve Canadians at home and abroad. And it was just a tremendous delight to be able to go to work and do that every day and fly a fighter jet in defense of Canada.
On the academic side, a pretty impressive resume, Royal Military College, MIT. You became an engineer. On the aviation side, equally, if not more impressive. And at one point, you're at Edwards Air Force Base in the United States flying jets. I mean, a storied Air Force base. And what was it like to be on the runway there?
Edwards Air Force Base is fantastic. And so if you're an airplane buff like me, it holds a special place in history. And it was stuff that I read about in books when I was a child. I mean, I read about Chuck Yeager breaking the sound barrier out there at Edwards, and pilots and test pilots like Neil Armstrong and Scott Crossfield and Joe Walker, Pete Knight flying the X-15, a winged rocket plane that went to space and back. And when I was at Edwards as the Canadian exchange officer to the United States Air Force flying F-16s and F-15s, I'd sit at the end of the runway waiting for my takeoff time on any particular mission, and you'd be able to see the entire inventory in the U.S. Air Force's arsenal taxi by you one by one, from long-range strategic stealth bombers to every fighter jet you could imagine, and then some. And it was really just getting to look through a photo storybook of aviation present in real life. So it was really quite something.
And what about that? Did you think back to that kid that went to the air show near Red Deer and imagine where you were at that moment? It must have been, as people describe it, one of those pinch me moments.
Yeah, I do look back to that child out in Red Deer, and I don't think they would have believed that they'd be sitting in the cockpit of that F-16 Viper, getting to see an air show right in front of their eyes on their own time.
So how do you get from there, which is already a pretty impressive place, to where you are now and, getting into the cockpit of that spacecraft behind you?
Yeah, I think that's another, you mentioned a pinch me moment. I have one right now as I look behind me with this beautiful space flight system, the mothership and the spaceship. I was an experimental test pilot. I had many years of experience doing that. And it was in 2020, and Virgin Galactic put an application out for new test pilots, and I applied with gusto.
Is there anything about the many different aircraft that you've flown up to this point and this spacecraft behind you? Are there any analogies there? Anything that taught you how to be at the controls of the spacecraft?
Yeah, so there's a reason that we hire trained test pilots. All of our test pilot cadre, the men and women that I work with in that particular cohort, they're phenomenal mentors and they have tremendous experience, and they've flown everything from U-2 spy planes to heavy transport aircraft to supersonic fighter jets like I flew. There are various parts of each of those mission sets that apply to these two vehicles behind me. We use our really high fidelity simulator, which is close by here in the hangar at Spaceport America in New Mexico, to train to fly the spaceship. And one thing that I'm always struck by is I've spent a lot of hours, as you can imagine, in the spaceship simulator over the last many months and years, was it actually glides a lot like an F-16. So on the reentry back to the landing at Spaceport America, it feels a reasonable amount like an F-16 on our simulated flame-out approaches that we would do at Edwards Air Force Base.
It sounds incredibly exciting. It sounds daunting. And for me as a layperson, sounds a little bit intimidating. As we do this interview a few days before the mission, are you nervous?
I think I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit. I do think that my line of work has acclimatized me to not be nervous and to focus on training and the fundamentals and the building block approach that we take here at Virgin Galactic as well. And we focus on safety and the mission and the people that we're going to take to space and expose to that new, brave environment. And I think that we settle those by practice. So if I get nervous, I hit the simulator with the commander of the spaceship that I'll be flying with, Nicola Pacile, who's a good friend of mine and a fantastic mentor. And that's how he and I calm our nerves. We hit the simulator for a couple of hours a day, and that does us just fine.
We are in this new era of space travel led by billionaires. Passengers are often, paying hundreds of thousands of dollars. So they're kind of super rich people, or rich people anyway. What do you say to critics who might dismiss all of this as a plaything for the rich?
Yeah, I think it's really good to look at our manifests of who we are flying these days. And if you look at this particular flight, and it's been publicized, Tuva Tasever is the second Turkish person ever in the history of that country to go to space, and he'll be flying with us in VSS Unity, which is behind me. Tuva is an engineer, and I spoke with him. I had dinner with him recently, and he was explaining to me how Turkey is a country of 87 million people, and two of them, well, he will be the second. Only one of them has ever been to space. And when that other Turkish astronaut was at the space station earlier this year, Tuva toured his country, and he said to me, Jameel, I get to express to a country that is predominantly young, with the youngest demographic in Europe, I get to express to them something that they thought was distant and untouchable to them, something that only happened in America, people going to space. And he said, I explained to them from somebody who looks like them, from somebody who grew up where they grew up, in their own language. I explained to them what the benefits are of human space exploration. And I think Tuva's a fantastic example of those diverse voices that we are giving by these commercial space endeavors and human space exploration. And when you look at some of the other passengers that have flown with us, we've flown a mother-daughter duo from Antigua and Barbados. Nobody from there has ever flown to space, and we flew them to space in 2023. And so I think that those people and folks like me who are, with my colleagues here at Virgin Galactic, we're at the coalface. We're the picks and shovels of commercial space exploration, and we're normal people who are really proud to be able to offer this to other people.
You're wearing a Canadian patch on your sleeve. And I just wonder, for the Canadians watching this, what message do you have for them?
I think the message would be to kids who grew up like I grew up. I was the son of immigrants to Canada, and my family was given so much opportunity in this country, and we're grateful for that. I'd offer to those kids that there's a way, right? If you can see it, you can be it. And I hope that I represent that for a lot of young people in Canada.
You sound a little bit emotional.
Yeah, I think it's hard not to be, right? When you look at these machines and what they represent, and they represent the people, like a really united people and company that are behind them. And yeah, it is emotional.
Jameel, you're an impressive person and about to go on an impressive mission. Thank you very much for speaking with us.
Thanks, Ian. It was lovely to chat with you.